Hail Internet! It's Paul, it's Matt, the Dork Lords. We're here talking about Moon Knight, Season 1, Episode 4, The Tomb. We open right where Episode 3 left off. Khonshu's been imprisoned in a statue by the other Egyptian gods. Stephen loses his Moon Knight powers, falls unconscious.
And collapses, yes.
Yes, falls unconscious in the desert, leaving Layla to have to save him and herself from thieves. We end with Mark and Steven meeting face to face and hugging. You know, that was sweet. In a mental institution.
They've made a lot of progress.
Right. Trying to escape, opening a door, and running into a surprisingly friendly hippo goddess, frankly. Taweret. She greets them. They freak out. Credits. Paul.
Yes.
What'd you think of Episode 4?
I enjoyed it. I liked it quite a bit. It's very intriguing there. Whatever dream space Mark and Steven are in. There's perhaps some evidence that we will finally see that third altar. So that'd be good.
Right, very much
and
so.
I liked, again, we are not going to get, by the end of this series, it's still going to be like 75%, Steven and 25% Mark looks like. It's like,
And you, going into it, you might have preferred it the other way is kind of what I'm getting out of that, yeah?
Well, I mean, no, this Steven is a completely created character, based on, Oscar Isaac and, the makers of the show. So, it's a nice character, it'll be interesting to see what it is going further. But, mostly, though, we're getting Steven, and that's an interesting choice.
I got you. This episode is kind of like two halves in a way, right? Like the Indiana Jones half. And then the half that's very similar to Legion in a lot of ways. We covered that show here on Dork Lords. We got playlists for each season there. But that one, had many episodes where our hero was in an institution, but it wasn't all in his head. And so very, very similar type things. And here, the institution, has many clues that it is all in his head. You've got most of the people that we've seen in real life, Layla, the human statue, his boss, etc. We see the Rubik's Cube that we saw a reference to in real life. We see cupcakes on the cart, much like the cupcake truck that he was in a chase scene in. Even the hippo is referenced when he in the gift shop. He has these stuffed hippo goddesses. So that's all. These are all references to real world analogs. We'll come back to that in a second. Just in chunks about like theories for what this means. Is it all in his head? Blah blah blah. But just to go back for a second to the Indiana Jones part, one of the things is we find out that in the MCU, Alexander the Great was an avatar of Amit.
Ah, yes.
And so, first of all, there's a couple of questions that come to mind for me for that. One, was he then the avatar that betrayed Amit? It sounds like it is because, obviously the statue trapping Amit is in his mouth. That was put it there pre-mummification. So anyway, I don't know. It feels like maybe, here's your theory crafting. Alexander the Great had a bit of an ego, apparently. So perhaps he thought of himself as a god eventually. And so was like, I don't need to serve you anymore. And maybe betrayed her in that way for some reason. I don't know. Anyway.
Is that what the theory you were working on?
No, I've got
You got theories galore.
I got theories galore. I've got a pretty crazy, frankly, theory. The more I think about it, I'm like, oh, that's not true. But I've got one for maybe how this is going to resolve itself, the mental institution part. But we'll get to that in a second. This one, I feel, reasonable theory that that maybe Alexander the Great,
betrayed
Amit. Also, I guess in the MCU, then it's suggesting that he was great because he had avatar powers, perhaps. Like, without that, he would have just been like, Alexander fair to middling. Alexander the replaceable.
Alexander Mediocre.
We get a couple of interesting plot moments where, for instance, Steven tells Layla that Mark stayed away to protect her. That in his mind, like, Khonshu wants her as an avatar, and Mark was trying to keep that from happening.
Yeah.
He also tells her that Mark promised to leave for good after he's done with Khonshu. Though Layla rightly points out maybe she should have been consulted as the spouse in all this. Steven kisses Layla, and then Mark punches himself in the face, whatever. So that's an interesting little...
He punches Steven in the face.
So we see, the little conflict there between them. Although when they meet and hug, they seem like they're like, bygones be bygones. Oh, there was a little jab from Steven where he's like, hey, if you need to know a recipe for a protein shake, I was like, oh, okay. We get into the tomb itself. The maze is like the Eye of Horus. They eventually find the tomb of Alexander the Great. You get these undead priests in there that are pretty creepy. The clicking sounds. They're using like echolocation, I guess, to find their way around. And they're the ones that are killing Harrow's people. It's why Harrow hasn't really found everything yet. It's because these undead priests are going around killing all of his followers. And I guess starting the mummification process by taking out their organs. Like, whoo. Yeah, the butchering sounds were like, woo, woo, wee. We get the scene again where Harrow kind of reiterates what he said last episode, but to Layla, like, Mark was present at your dad's murder. Layla confronts Mark. She makes Steven bring Mark back and confronts him about this. So the conversation is interesting there so Mark says, my partner got greedy. He executed everyone at the dig site. I tried to save your father, but I couldn't save him. He shot me too. I was supposed to die that night, but I didn't die that night. I should have, so on and so forth. I've been trying to tell you since the moment we met, but I just didn't know how, basically. And she says, what, that's the reason we met? It's because you had a guilty conscience? Which is that sounds bad. It's like, the only reason you sought her out was to explain your involvement in her father's murder, and then you married her without telling her. It's like, oh, ouch. That's not good. That's problematic.
Yes.
I did also like the little comedic beat where Steven they're setting up for some rope climbing. And she's like, all right, we're going to belay. And he's like, what's belay? Yes. She says, I still can't tell when you're joking. And then, you can see he's not joking at all. He has no idea.
He's not talking. No. And it's, yes, you could criticize that from thinking, like, he doesn't know stuff. You don't know what he knows. And when he falls, you could have been like, oh, you don't know what I'm doing about what you're doing. Exactly. Oh, are you all right? Like, she doesn't even know. Like, oh, there's a problem? Did you hit a bad stone or something?
That was a great belay. Well done. Then we get, Harrow shoots Mark twice in the chest. So that is,
yes.
And we see blood. And obviously he can't turn into Moon Knight. He doesn't have those powers. So that's fairly fatal. It doesn't, have to be. But it seems like a pretty, ouch.
Sure, yeah.
So he falls into this pool of water. Perhaps notably, although I don't really have a theory on this part, but he still likely has the statue trapping Amit with him when he falls.
Okay.
I'm just saying, does he take Amit with him into the mental institution?
Are you under the impression of that sometime after getting shot and falling into water that he goes into a mental institution?
No. But I'm just saying I'm equating the mental institution to like an Egyptian purgatory, essentially.
Okay.
Like he's in like holding plane while he waits to be judged. Is kind of my thought.
Okay.
That's my thought. So maybe if he came there perhaps with Amit, I don't know. I don't know what.
It's an interesting idea of purgatory, not a dream state, but another plane.
Yeah, and obviously it's catered for him, right? He's populated it with his thoughts. What is your thought on that? Does that sound stupid, or do you
I hadn't even considered that. I assumed that it was just some dream state that he was in while suffering from gunshots wounds.
Okay.
That's what I imagined.
Like
but yours makes more sense. Well, it's still yet to be seen how he's going to get out of that.
Yeah. I mean, they've set up this whole thing about being judged.
And one of the things that apparently is in the comics is a situation where he was reunited with Khonshu via priests that were kind of like that, one that was butchering that one guy. So that's what's been suggested, I've heard. But that would be, I would feel better about that than what I was imagining, which is a delusion. Not that I wasn't necessarily down on that, but I like the idea of that he's on another plane of existence. It just becomes even more curious. Like, I was looking ahead, and we had earlier speculated about, the other characters in Mark's life, which are his parents. And apparently they're coming next episode. So, yeah, I like that idea better than what I was imagining.
Okay. Harrow shows up in the institution, in the dream institution, let's call it.
Yes.
As a psychiatrist who's trying to convince Mark that it's all in his head, right? And part of his proof is this show Tomb Buster.
Yes.
Which is pretty funny little bit. It's an 80s style show. He's an Indiana Jones type character. His name's Stephen Grant. And so it's like, you watch the show, you idolize the show, and that's why you created all this stuff. And
now, is this where your crazy theory comes in?
It's coming. It's coming. Now, Mark remembers that Harrow shot him. And he finds Stephen's personality confirms that. Yep, I remember getting shot. They're like, oh, all right, very good. And then we have this third unopened sarcophagus that you alluded to, the fact that it's probably the third personality. Let's call it Jake. Oh, okay, so what's happening here? All right, here's the far out theory, probably not remotely true theory. Okay. Let's start with a couple things we know that'll make the theory sound more believable. Khonshu asked Stephen to have Mark come find him and free him, right? So, he's like, have Mark find me and free me. Okay, so we know that. Yes. Stephen told Layla that Khonshu wants her as an avatar. So he mentioned that in this last episode.
He did.
Mark said his partner killed Layla's father and shot him. Okay.
Yes.
You, Paul, mentioned last week that the partner in the comics is Bushman.
Yes.
Essentially Mark's nemesis. But now, remember that this show is a miniseries. It's 6 episodes, and there's no planned season 2 at the moment.
Yeah, sure.
Awfully late to introduce a hero's nemesis now. Which means to me that we've already met the killer. Like, in other words, if they were like, episode 6, they're like, by the way, it was Bushman. There he is. Like, it's a weird, I don't know. It's an odd thing. Either it's just a throwaway, like, some guy who nobody, it doesn't matter, killed your dad, or somehow it's important to the plot. So my theory starts with Bushman didn't kill Layla's dad.
Jake Lockley did?
At least Mark feels confident that he did. I think it's questionable whether Jake actually killed Layla's dad, but Mark believes he did. So when he says my partner did it, he's talking about Jake Lockley.
Interesting.
And that maybe then the shooting could be wrestling for control. Like, while wrestling for control of the body, he ended up shooting himself, or somehow, I could imagine a scenario like punching himself in the face. He ended up shooting himself, and so the wound to himself and in his mind, killing Layla's dad is connected to this third personality. I was just telling Paul before we started, like, I was actually changing my theory on the fly, because the part of the theory that doesn't quite work is, let's assume for a second Jake did kill Layla's dad.
Yes.
They don't end up together then, right? Like, there's no way you'd be like, this other personality of mine killed your dad, but anyway, are we good? Let's just hang out together. You wouldn't end that and have them like come back together. And I think they do come back together. So if that's true, I feel like there's a twist there where Mark assumes Jake killed Layla's dad, but maybe it was something like Harrow. Harrow actually was there and killed something like that. Maybe, perhaps. So that's a weird twist. I get it, but it's still in theory. It's in the works. It's in the works. Are they that dark? I guess. Are they so dark that they're like, yeah, Jake killed Layla's dad, and that's it.
It's like, I always dislike meeting the parents. So since I've killed this guy who has a daughter, hey.
Yeah. Having been shot again, I think Mark, much like he was back when he was dying, apparently after Layla's dad died, he was dying and Khonshu saved him.
Right.
I think he's going to have to be saved again by Khonshu. But the only way for that to happen is for Layla to rescue Khonshu and perhaps maybe at least temporarily become his avatar.
Ah, okay, that's interesting.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. So meanwhile, in order for his soul to survive this Egyptian purgatory long enough for Layla to save him, I think he's going to need all of his personalities to help thwart the psychiatrist Harrow and his orderlies. So hence, it means releasing and coming to terms with this third personality, with Jake, let's call it. So that you'll have three personalities in the dream state mental institution, hanging on for as long as they can. Layla, in a separate scene, is rescuing Khonshu. That happens. She becomes the avatar. Somehow they make a deal. I feel like eventually Mark ends up being, again, Moon Knight, but there's like a temporary switching of Moon Knight to Layla in order to rescue Mark / Steven / Jake. That's the theory.
Okay. Yeah, it's not the worst theory in the world.
All right.
There are times when I'm willing to suggest that you be put into a booby hatch after your theories, but that's not the worst theory there, I would say.
I appreciate that, sir. Any thoughts, any tweaks to that, or any thoughts of other ideas, or what thoughts have you got?
I mean, I was thinking that for some reason Amit was, would elect to save him. But because you would think like, oh, don't stop the person who's trying to stop you, but it's just because someone's working in your favor doesn't mean that you can't do things that are that would be in opposition to that. So, but I'm not. That's just a possibility in my mind where I would like. Okay, I thought that might be possible, but what you're saying, I mean. Yeah, then it's going to become a question of her escaping and getting to where the, where Khonshu is being stored. I guess to free him. I'm not in love with that, but if they establish, okay, he's dead, but he could be resurrected. While Layla goes to accomplish that, I wouldn't have a problem with that. It's just. It's one of those. Okay, we've got ourselves into a jam. How are we going to get out of it? So it's like, okay, to get to where you got to go, I can tolerate that.
I like your idea too. That much like when Mark back in the day was dying and Khonshu, maybe Avatar here, he might he's dying again, and he does have Amit with him. That it would be a reversal where Amit brings it back. That's interesting. That would be a twist for sure, but I feel like that also it wouldn't give Layla anything to do. She's just going to be sitting topside, kind of waiting for him to come back. Well, I guess she's crazy person in the mental institution is who she is. But I feel like this gives her more something to do. Hey, I can participate in the redemption of Mark. So yeah. Anyway, we'll see. It could be completely just proven within a few minutes of the beginning of episode 5. But if you out there have a cool or even a wacky theory on how this is going to resolve, feel free to put it in the comments. I'd love to
let
hear
us know
your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Do you think we'll see Bushman?
No, I don't. I'm 50-50 on whether or not it will be one of Mark's alters who killed him. And actually, you're not 100% on that either. You're kind of
right.
It sounds like you're thinking that Mark may have thought that it was one of his alters, and maybe when we see what really happened, it was because
I just feel like that's a deal breaker. It's a deal breaker for them to be together then at that point, and I feel like they are together. It's just like, yeah, I killed your dad. I mean, not me, real, but kind of me. But
dramatically, it might be better if she, realized that, and that keeps them from being together that way.
Right? No, you're right. That could.
She might decide to work to stop this problem, even though she can't forgive him for, his body for doing that. Which means she can't forgive Mark, even though Mark is not implicit, and Steven. She can't even forgive Steven. So
yeah, you're right. That is very dramatic, and maybe that's the direction they take. It would be sad and tragic, but that's good storytelling.
Yeah, tragedy. And it meant he was right not to tell her.
I mean, maybe that. I don't think they're going to do this, but they could actually, Mark confides in Steven, like, yeah, actually, it was this third personality that did it, and I just never told her. And Steven can be like, yeah, we shouldn't tell her. And then they just don't, and then they just like carry on, and we know, but they never tell. No, they wouldn't do that, but.
I guess something that I hadn't thought about, especially since we're thinking that, or at least I was thinking that, amongst the things that we'll see with Mark is his early experience. I'd mentioned that the comics character of Mark is Jewish and has this connection to the Holocaust and Nazis and things like that. So that's something we might see. Apparently fighting that Nazi rather young was the beginning of the sort of Khonshu, like, I will punish the people who have done wrong. So that may be where his connection begins. Seeing the parents, though, in the next episode, I think we're going to get even more idea, perhaps, of him and his alters and his history, like he told Layla that he had it under control, which makes a lot of sense, Typically, the idea of multiple personality disorders begins when someone is young and is traumatized.
Might see Chicago as well.
Yes.
And so I did manage to verify that, I mentioned this in the last recap, but that black Cubs hat exists.
Yes.
And I thought something kind of cool too is, it's a C for Cubs, but it's also a little crescent moon. So I think they kind of brought the little Chicago and the moon idea into it. So I give them credit on that one. I think we're going to get, as you suggested here, a flashback to the various personalities, including this mysterious third personality. I think we're going to see its origins, how they got along over time, and and leading up to the fateful night when Layla's dad was killed somehow. So I think that's going to be our revelatory moment.
Sure.
So, all right. Cool. I'm looking forward to it. We'll be back talking about episode 5. So come back for that. Thanks, Paul. As always, good sir.
Penultimate episode,
some may say. So, yeah, come on back for that. And, we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.